Good morning, Moms of Master Books. Hopefully your week is going well. Today we're going to talk about the Principles of Mathematics series. This month we are focused on math curriculum and what series are available. Last week Anna discussed the math lessons for a living education. And this week I'll be discussing the junior high level, which is the Principles of Mathematics series. Math level or principles of, let me go back. Math lessons for a living education, level 6 is a transitionary subject that takes the concepts that are needed to move into the Principles of Mathematics series and prepares them for that. So with the Principles of Mathematics, that was actually the first math curriculum that we developed and brought to the market. We were extremely excited about that product, especially because of the Biblical Worldview component, and it matches so perfectly our mission statement to impact eternity, ink on paper to impact eternity, as well as laying a solid apologetics foundation and integrating it into a subject. So, Math or Principles of Mathematics, book 1 and 2. There's 2 books. It's designed optimally for grades 7 and 8. In the grade recommendations, you'll see 6 through 8. 6th grade would be a student who is very advanced and able to do it. But I would highly recommend that the Principles of Math be reserved for grades 7 and 8. Some parents, if a student gets to algebra in 9th grade and is really struggling, some families will actually do 7 and 8 in a combined year, more of an intensive, math intensive, or some may even change and stretch it out for the 2 years and then the algebra and then a geometry, and they may put it on a transcript as a general math, a pre-algebra course, that type of thing. But ideally it's for grades 7 and 8. So the way it's set up is we have a student book, forgive my tabs please, but we have a student book and a teacher guide. And so let me explain, in Master Books world, a teacher guide is not like a teacher guide with other curriculums. Okay, so the teacher guide essentially would have in it a daily schedule where it tells what to do on what day, along with the option to do check boxes for the students or grading. Sometimes what we would do in our homeschool is tear these pages out, and this becomes actually kind of the goal sheet for the student each day. So this would have the student activity sheet or the student schedule. Then it would have the activity sheets, and generally in this program there's 1 sheet per day that a student would do, and it's generally 3 problems. There may be multiple components of each problem, but it shouldn't take a student more than 15 to 30 minutes depending on the topic and the student's interest. Okay, and then in the back would be quizzes, tests, and then answer keys. Now, the reason we call our teacher guides a teacher guide is because there are going to be components in this that you would not hand to the student, being answer keys and that type of thing. So some people will tear out the answer keys, the quizzes and tests, and they'll just give the student the workbooks. Other will give the sheets out or put it in a 3-ring binder. There's a lot of flexibility in how to use this, but by labeling it as a teacher guide, it stops somebody from just handing it to the student and giving them the answer key along with this information without tearing it out. So your children may be different. In junior high, I was a sinful creature with if the answers were given to me, I certainly felt that that was a gift from God and would use that to my advantage to complete the course. So we want to make sure that students actually complete the course without having the answers in the beginning and then can go back and use that. So if you're on, I'd love to know if you're using Principles of Mathematics currently, or if this is a curriculum that you would be considering either now or in the future. Then I'll kind of monitor that. Okay, so you have the student book and the teacher guide. Generally, what will happen with the Principles of Mathematics is a student will read anywhere from 2 to 5 pages a day of reading instruction in the student book. And then they'll go and do an activity sheet. And again, the activity sheets are typically going to be, a page front and back of the information that they would be working on. So the different concepts. So this one I just opened up to has absolute value, distance, and temperature with some different problems for that, and then some skill sharpening. And that would be essentially what they would do. Now, my son went into this program, and I talked to him about it this morning. He said, on average, the average lesson only took him about 15 to 20 minutes a day. He's very advanced and picks maths up quickly. I think for a lot of students, if they're really applying themselves, should be able to do it in the 30 to 45 minutes with no problem, but perhaps less. Okay, let's see. Hey, Jessica. Nicole is catching alive. That is good. Just switched to Principles of Math for a 9th grader who struggles in math. I think it works very well if there's review needed or firming up some foundational concepts as a pre-algebra type of course. Let's see. Melissa's considering it for next year. Okay, so I got to do my best job to sell it. Using Principles of Mathematics on the semester book track for my 8th grader. Okay. So Laura, that is a little bit more of an intensive, right? Because you're doing one book in one semester, the second book, 2 books actually in a year. I'd love to know how intensive that is for the student. Are you still able to do it in the 45-minute window? And how does that work? Jessica, actually, Jessica, a lot of I've sold a lot of the math books to parents who are enjoying just reading through the concepts because there's so much biblical worldview incorporated into it, and there's so many interesting facts. You wouldn't think of a math textbook as being interesting reading, but I think it is for sure, even outside of the concepts. Let's see. Karen, my son is working through math lesson 6. Okay, so math 6 is that transition. Let's shore up the concepts. Let's do a little bit more abstract and critical thinking and prepare them to move into this course. Now, we would typically say books 1 and 2 would make up a pre-algebra course. They're going to get all the foundational concepts, the critical thinking, problem solving to prepare them to move into algebra. For my son who went through this series, he feels that it prepared him perfectly, he said, to go into the Jacob's Algebra. If I can just say, Jacob's Algebra is absolutely no joke. It has been around for over 30 years. It's been used by a number of charter schools and schools and homeschooling for years. And the reputation is remarkable. So I'll be talking about that next week more, but this series definitely moves them into that. Okay, so we have a student book, a teacher book. Generally read 2 to 5 pages a day, 1 activity sheet with about 5 problems. There can be multiple problems in that, but there's 5 different things that are being worked on average. One of the questions that came up is, well, it's heavy in reading. That's the criticism I hear. I would say I don't feel that it is heavy reading for a 7th and 8th grader. 3 to 5 pages a day of instruction, I don't feel is intensive for that. Especially because Math Lessons for a Living Education is unique in that you hand it to the student and essentially are giving them the responsibility of learning it. So there has to be some written out instruction. If you're comparing it to a curriculum like BJU, well, BJU was designed more for a classroom with a teacher. And so it's going to have a different methodology of teaching it, where this course is definitely designed to hand to the student, let them read, understand the concepts, and then build on that. So it's outside the scope and sequences, so to speak, of the math courses a lot of us may have had in a school, where the teacher is teaching some concepts, then we do practice, then we do some more practice and review, and that type of thing, with a couple of word problems at the end of the chapter. Principles of Mathematics is designed a lot different in that it has a lot of application built into it. It's written very conversationally, but there's a lot of application. So I'll talk a little bit more on that. Okay, Principles of Mathematics 1 would be ideal for a 7th grader. We do have a placement test. When you go into the product page, when you go to the product pages, there's a placement test for Principles of Math Book 1 and Principles of Mathematics Book 2. We highly encourage that. You hand it to them, let them see if they understand basic operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions. Can they work with the fractions of addition, multiplication, subtraction, division? What about decimals? Do they understand decimals and mixed numbers? Let's see, some place value. Does a 3 represent? Yeah, so there's some place value questions. And while there is review in the book, and it's going to shore up a lot of what they've already learned, if a student is struggling in some of those areas, chances are you're going to want to go back and do either review on that or put them in Math Lessons for a Living Education Book 6. So highly recommend the placement test with all of our curriculum. Because so much of our curriculum is more skill-based, grades are great for a rough idea, but you really want to refine that and place it down. Now, you may be coming from a curriculum that has a lot of, it may be just set up with, here's how we do addition, and then pages of addition and that type of thing. It may be difficult, or a transition. It may just take a little bit of a mental game to switch over to a Principles of Math, which is going to be a lot more instruction, application, and practice in application. So let's see. Angela says 5th grader using Principles of Mathematics in 5th grade. Angela, because of your background, I'm assuming your students are not intimidated by mathematics, and you're not intimidated by mathematics. So your students probably are advanced. Would I be correct in saying that for using Principles of Math in 5th grade? The brain development, we move from very concrete 1 + 2 = 3 is very concrete, and we teach them that. So as they move a little bit further, we begin asking more abstract questions like 1 + x = 3. Solve for x. Well, that requires more brain functioning than 1 + 3 =, right? Because that's more of a memorization, more of a I can grasp that concept, but when I'm asked to think differently, my brain is having to look at information differently and think more critically. Sometimes what we see in students' development is that 6th, 7th, 8th grade is this huge transition spot where they're being asked to do more critical thinking, more abstract thinking, and problem-solving skills. If they haven't had a lot of practice in that and developed that, then that can begin to, you'll start to see those challenges. And so I think sometimes what we're seeing with families or students that are struggling in an area is more, they've had the repetition, they've had the drill and kill methods, they've had the memorization work, so to speak, but they haven't had a lot of problem-solving practice. One thing that I really like about Math Lessons for a Living Education is it has a lot more of applied learning, a lot more problem solving, critical thinking skills are required because we're learning how to use the math, not just the math skills. And I think that it helps prepare a student to move into the principles of mathematics so well. Okay. Amber, I have a 9th grade, been struggling with the book for 3 years. About midway through, is where he starts having problems. Any advice? Yeah, there's probably a lot there to qualify, Amber. Is it more in word problems? Is it more in the abstract thinking, problem solving skills, and that? Does his reading comprehension good? Does he usually have good reading comprehension? Those would be 2 questions if I could have you answer those. Cynthia, my 7-year-old is working through Math Lessons 4. If he continues at this pace, he will be in 4th grade. Let's see. Cynthia, if he is advanced in math, and he's doing well, I don't think there's any reason to hold him back. Some students develop sooner than others, and there's nothing that says that a student that is grasping the concepts and can do it can't move into the principles of mathematics earlier, right? It's more skill-based, it's developmentally based than it would be the number on a textbook. So as long as he's grasping it. Now, sometimes a student will actually begin to slow down a little bit. And so if he slows down, let him go at his pace. If he continues to go through and he can understand and comprehend and read, my recommendation would be I would let him go through it. He may be one of those super students who does a lot of advanced math in his high school. And as long as it's a high school level course like algebra, you can begin accumulating credits towards graduation. So some students are able to graduate early. That may be the track that he's on. Okay. Some of the strengths that I look at from the principles of mathematics, the number one that I get most excited about is worldview. It's hard to believe a math course would teach so much worldview, but it actually does. Let me just show you a couple of concepts. Okay, so addition of liquid. There's a whole concept on addition, and it talks about liquid. Dip your hands into a cup of water, let a droplet fall on an empty plate. Dip your hand again and drop another droplet of water into the first one. What happened? The droplets should have merged together into a single droplet. Although one water molecule plus another molecule equals 2, one droplet of water plus one droplet of water does not equal 2 droplets. They merge together to form one larger droplet. That seems to be a huge consistency. Why doesn't one droplet plus one water droplet equal 2 water droplets? Because God has a different, though equally consistent principle for governing liquids at a visible level. The water molecules follow the addition we would expect than he does solids. The apparent contradiction in how liquids combine reminds us that no matter how well we think we have things figured out, God's laws in the universe are more complex than we can imagine. On the other hand, the way teeny raindrops combine presents a huge problems if we believe math is a product of human reasoning. After all, human reasoning says 1 plus 1 equals 2. Obviously, human reasoning cannot be trusted when dealing with raindrops. And if not here, can we trust any of math? Or is it a delusion? Whenever we abandon the biblical worldview, we end up with a host of difficulties. Thankfully, God has given us his truth to live upon. If we take God at his word, we can use addition confidently, knowing it does not rest on man's reasoning, but on God's power. At the same time, we can recognize God's greatness and expect him to see him holding the universe together in marvelous ways that no one set of math can ever describe. There are parts of this there's a synopsis at the end of the chapters. The basic biblical principles for math. The Bible tells us where math originated. Since God created everything, he created math too. This does not mean God created the symbols we write, but he created the consistencies those symbols represent. Symbols like 1 + 1 = 2 record the consistent way God causes objects to operate. Number 2, the Bible tells us why math is possible. Why does 1 + 1 consistently equal 2? Because God both created this consistency and keeps it in place. Math's very ability to work is a testimony to God's faithfulness. In this universe, we're simply a random collection of chemicals, or if we served an inconsistent God, we would have no reason to expect objects to add or subtract consistently. And it goes through to talk about how the Creator has laid out how math is the language that the Creator uses to bring order to the universe, and his consistency proves that he is a consistent God, right? And some may disagree with me on this, but I would even recommend that for junior high, if you're doing this math course, you could certainly incorporate a Bible and say that this is math and a Bible, because there's so much biblical worldview being taught in this, and especially at the end of the week for discussion and that type of thing. I think you could almost get away with the combination. Now, you may want to do more Bible, and you may want to have them look up verses and stuff like that, but there is a lot of biblical worldview in this. So worldview is important, and I believe there was a good post yesterday about somebody not thinking that the student was picking things up, but actually the student is absorbing the worldview and developing their own worldview based on that. When you 7th and 8th grade is such a pivotal time, right? Because our students are starting to look around them and try to make decisions of, do I want to maintain my parents' faith? And do I trust what the church is saying? Do I trust what the TV is saying and my friends are saying? And beginning to lay a solid worldview, I think, is very important. Angela Math Girl, 11-year-old homeschooled student in my calculus class. Yeah, I say if a student is able to go ahead, for heaven's sake, let them excel in math. Okay, another thing that I really like about the principles of mathematics is the critical thinking and problem-solving skills. I think that math courses that just teach the principles without actually beginning to teach how to think critically and apply it to the everyday situation do a disservice. We're learning math for a purpose, right? So when it's teaching addition and subtraction in this course, it actually then is teaching time zones. So when I travel, I have to go between time zones, and I have to subtract hours or add hours to my time to be on time. It's using those type of applications, so students aren't just doing pages and pages of addition and subtraction problems. They're also doing, hey, in this time zone, it's this time, you're in this time zone here, what's the difference, and that type of thing. It talks about temperature, when you're looking at comparing temperatures, just very real life applications that I really appreciate in that. Let's see. Okay. One of the things, Amber, is his reading comprehension is good, considered at grade level or above. Fraction and decimals are a major struggle for him. So when I came into, I came out of a public education in high school, went into a private school. That private school did testing, and based on testing, they diagnosed what they would call learning gaps. There were some areas that I didn't have shored up in my education. If fractions and decimals are one of those, it may be worth looking at like the principles of math. Look at the table of contents where there's fractions or decimals. Maybe just buy the digital copies and focus on some of that work, or do some extra supplements on fractions and decimals. Because if he doesn't understand those concepts and then he moved into the principles of mathematics course, it's going to be a struggle for him. and fractions and decimals require a little bit of critical thinking and application for sure. Using principles for my 8th grade next year would be too much. Amanda, I don't think it's too much. Some of you that are doing the courses 2 in 1 year, I'd love if you'd type in and let us know about how long it takes for your student to do that. Are they struggling at all with that? Let's see. Yeah, so when I went into the school, even though I had learning gaps and I had to do decimals and fractions, it still was counting towards my high school credit as a general math. Now, colleges will want higher math levels, some of them. Others, you can do a math placement test, you can do the SATs and that type of thing for entrance. So a lot depends on the college. But what's most important, I think, Amber, is if your student is struggling, not worrying about the grade level, just going to where they're struggling. So it really doesn't do much good to do a pre-algebra course if a foundational concept like fractions or decimals isn't working. Now, the author, Kate Loop, does have supplements on her website, and I will put a link to the course to her website up on this post. But for $59 a year, you can have additional support, and she explains a little bit. So maybe if he's having trouble with the grasping the concepts in one way, having somebody explain it might be helpful. So that's an option that's available too through her website. So critical thinking, problem solving, application, I like that. The price, so an entire year of math, the 2 books on our website, you can purchase the set for $59. If you calculated that over a 36-week, you're looking at about $1.60 a week for a math curriculum, which I think is phenomenal. And right now we're running a special on all of our math curriculum that if you're looking to do a reset with your current math curriculum, you could certainly do that. And the coupon code is MATH10, M-A-T-H 10 at checkout. That will get you an additional 10% off any of Master Books math curriculum for the month of October. And I will put that link in as well. Let's see, Desiree, both books in one. Maybe a challenge for middle school students, especially if they are struggling. Yeah, and a lot depends on the struggle in the student, and this is a big time where development plays in. And I was one of those students that really struggled to make sense of fractions, decimals, that type of thing. Even in college, my business math courses, which should have been fairly simple and straightforward, were a challenge that today is no challenge because I'm using it all the time and I see how it fits and how it works. But to just hand it to a student and try to explain to them all the details of fractions or all the details of decimals sometimes is a difficult thing. Okay, let's see. My daughter is a strong reader, just finishing Prince Miles, came from 8-7. Good handle, but had some issues. Breezing through at the book semester, thinking she'll slow down. Yeah, in Saxon 8-7 would have been, let's see, 8-7 would be am I right? That would be 8th grade or an advanced 7th grader would be Saxon 8-7. Laura, correct me if I'm wrong on that. I know they use the 2 numbers, and I think if it's like Saxon 7-6, it's 7th grade math, 6th, an advanced 6th grader would be the way that they rank that. So by rights, if she came out of Saxon 8-7, she would have been in a Saxon 8th grade. 4-5. I could be backwards on that. It could be 8th grade struggling. If somebody can correct me if you're familiar with Saxon, it's been a long time since I've worked with Saxon on that. But Saxon especially, they should have foundational concepts there and should do pretty well in this course. Okay. I'm right. So, yeah, if they came from a Saxon 8, then they should actually be, Principles of Math might have been a step down. But if they're doing both courses and combining it for an algebra half, that would be good. And it's certainly, the review isn't going to hurt on that. Okay. I'm bobbling a lot. I'm sorry. Let's see. Okay. Price, additional support, perfect prep for the algebra, the Jacob's algebra. This style of conversational style teaching and application critical thinking skills is something that halfway through Saxon. Okay. Yeah, so Laura says halfway through the Saxon book and taking hours to do her math, Principles of Mathematics, much faster for her. I would assume that she was probably on level. It was the drill and kill method that was just beginning to overwhelm her. It wasn't so much her ability to pick up the concepts. And if she was an 8-7, then yeah, that would just be a lot of the same type of work. And where we tend to see the students struggling would be usually two areas. One is the brain development isn't there. They just haven't developed critical thinking skills. And some of those type of activities are things that you may want to work on is some of that. Or the other would be some gaps in the learning on a critical type of thing like decimals or fraction, or maybe they didn't get long division down, that type of thing, and maybe just beginning to look for where are the holes or the gaps and how can we fill that in and reinforce that before we move on. So, okay, so one of the questions that I saw came up with was the student was struggling with the define, plan, execute, and check method for problem solving. Now this is exactly where I'm talking about critical thinking skills. What this is doing is saying, okay, in a word problem, the student needs to do, here's 4 things that if you do this, it will help you with word problems. And these are more of it's kind of an approach or method to critical thinking. So the first thing is, when you come to a word problem, what are they looking for? In the word problem that was actually given, I think, had to do with a business. Suppose you have an online business reselling old books, ignoring shipping costs and other supplies and licenses. It costs you $30 a month for a storage unit, $40 for a post office box, $10 for a website. How much did you spend in 3 years? Hint, 12 months in 1 year. So it actually gives you a little bit of a cheat there because it breaks down how many months in a year. So what do we know? We've got to define that first, right? So we just write out what we know. We know that our expenses are about $80 a month. If we combine the expenses, we have $80 of expenses. And then we know 12 months in a year, and we're looking for 3 years. So essentially, we're going to do 80 times 36, and that would give us the total. So first to define what we know, what are the facts that we know? That's the definition part. The planning part, what do we have to do in order to find an answer? Well, we've got to figure out how many months there are, because we're looking for, the months in a year times 3. I gave the wrong method, but okay. And then the execute is to actually do the math. So we've looked at the facts. What's it going to take to find the answer? Then we execute and we do the math there. Now your student may be able to deduct really quickly. Like, I don't need to write out what information I have. I just get it. That's okay, as long as they're looking at the problem from the concept of, can I define what I'm supposed to find? What information do I have? Here's the math that I execute. And then we want to check it. Does it work out backwards so that I can check it? And that's it. We don't want to overcomplicate that. It's more of an approach to critical thinking and problem solving. And like I say, critical thinking with math and application is a big difference with some of the math curriculums that just have either real easy word problems or a lot of just practice and repetition of the math, but aren't actually teaching the student how to do it. So by teaching a formula to approach a problem, it's not fail-safe, because word problems are like riddles. You really have to engage your brain to think through that. And depending on the student and their capabilities, that's where you have the struggle of, this is hard. My brain doesn't want to do this. So it begins looking for ways out of it. By having a formula, I go to it, I approach it, and I say, okay, I've got to define it first. What are they looking for, and what information do I have? And that once you've defined that, now you have a framework that you can say, well, what math is required based on what they want and what information I have? Can I even solve this? And then once I have that, how to just do the math and execute. So it's a very easy way to approach it. As soon as there's a word problem, you can say to your student, okay, what are they asking? Once they know what they're asking, well, what information have they given you to solve that? Right? That's the define. And you don't have to overthink it. It's just, let's define what information we have. What facts do we have? What's our solution? How do we implement a solution? Now, this is just a math course, but let's talk about overwhelming life application, right? Any problem you encounter today, if I was coaching you, I would say the exact same thing. Okay, what are the facts? What do we need to solve? Where's the tension lie? What's the anxiety? What are you experiencing here? What are the facts? Once we know the facts, what do we want the outcome to be? Let's define that, because once we define that, now we have something to work with, and then we can begin preparing or planning the steps that are going to be needed to apply it to life to actually move out of it. So this method for teaching math can easily be applied towards any life coaching as well. You need to write an essay. Okay, let's define, what do we need to write an essay about? What information do we have? What information do we need? What are the requirements that are there? Now we've defined that. Once we've defined that, let's plan it out. What we need to get some more information. We need to put together an outline. We need to have somebody proofread it for us, write a rough draft, and then a final copy. So now we've defined it, we've planned it, and now we execute it, right? So this method that's being taught is not only good for math, but it's actually just a really good life skill to approach any problem you have. Look at the facts. What do we need to accomplish? What are the facts? And then from there, we can begin to plan. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful too. Okay. Again, we're doing a special all month on the math curriculum. The coupon is Math 10. Use it at checkout. You'll get an additional 10% off any Master Books math product, including the digital downloads. So if your students have some learning gaps and you want to just print off a couple chapters on fractions, maybe you don't want to do the whole Math 6 or fractions. Maybe you don't want to do the whole Math 6 course. You just want to focus on some of the lessons that focus on fractions. Then you could buy the digital, print those off, do just that, and fill in the learning gaps. Okay? If you have any other questions, be sure to type them in for me so that I can answer them. As far as preparing for the algebra concepts, it does. My son told me this morning that it didn't just prepare him, it had actually taught him the foundational processes, so that as he's moved into algebra, it's actually been a very easy transition for him. Let's see. Yes, Carity, it's a great life skill. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, isn't it? Okay, so as home educators, right, hopefully you agree with me, as home educators, we need life skills. So we're not just teaching kids how to do 2 + 2 = 4 addition. We're trying to prepare them for life skills. And this, when I approach a problem in math, this critical thinking skill is more than that. It's a life skill. If I can do this with a math problem, solve this riddle, well, what about when every time I go down at the park and there's a bully, what are the facts? What is a plan that I can put in place to avoid having this happen to me? And how do I execute that? And then begin executing that. So all of these subjects should not be independent of real life and integrating skills in life. And that's what I love about Principles of Mathematics. It's just a very common sense approach. Nicole, did you see my question about the post placing within Principles of Math? Nicole, was that, please confirm, was that the student is doing a lot of review and wondering if you can jump ahead? I think that was it. You absolutely could. This is one of those, though, where you have to adapt a little bit. With any Master Books product, the beauty of our courses are we encourage you to own it, make it yours, rip it apart, do whatever it takes. So we make sure that we put a table of contents in the beginning, which is essentially a scope and sequence for the course. If there are areas that you know that your student has already mastered and done well, like, they understand multiplication and division, and you may not think that they need to do that or prove that work, and you want to accelerate, you can. The one area of caution with this course is it may still be worth having them read it, because there's so much good worldview and little tidbits and stuff like that I think it's handy. I also think that the critical thinking skills that are being developed, even though it's review, you're building on the critical thinking skills. So if it's brain dead review, where it's like, this is way below me, I'm way ahead of this, and I don't need this, then I would say maybe let it go. If it's just good, solid review of skills that are going to be used ahead of time, then I think I would probably suggest maybe you could do an accelerated, like, hey, if it's so easy, let's double up and do 2 lessons a day or something along that nature. And maybe that's not enjoyable because I've already learned this and I've already done this, but so much of the worldview in that is just good information for a student to have. But we encourage you to own this. So once you get this, don't be afraid to, if you don't want the student to have to do a lot of review, I wouldn't worry about that. Let's see. Mastery or spiral? Okay. If a concept is not sticking, do we park there until it's mastered? Yeah, so here's my 2 cents, Sharon, and the world may disagree with me, and that's good. There are going to be math people that probably have a better answer. Mastery or spiral is when you have a curriculum that is not teaching good application. So I want you to master addition, so I give you page after page after page after page of addition until you've proven to me that you understand the concepts. Spiral, I teach you a concept, I come back to it, I teach more of a concept, I come back to it, teach more of a concept, and build on that. And then I'm teaching other concepts at the same time, and it's a little bit more of an integrated approach. When you learn addition in a course like Principles of Mathematics, the first time it's taught to you, you do sort of speak it or master it because you're learning the concept and you're learning how to apply just that concept. As the course builds, it becomes spiral, and you're having to go back and use that skill over and over again because math is integrated into it. So when I look at a problem like the one that I gave for business of what are my expenses, I'm having to use addition and multiplication to check it. I'm having to use subtraction or division. So I'm constantly, with an applied learning type course, not only mastering it, but I'm also getting the reinforcement. So I don't need pages and pages of repetition to prove that I've mastered something. And really, I probably shouldn't, like, if I'm stuck on something, there's a good chance that maybe I need to do a little bit more reinforcement or have a little additional help. But it's not spiraling that it's going to reteach the concept over and over again. Does that make sense? Math Lessons is one of those great programs that they ask master or spiral, and I say both. I mean, it's both. You're mastering a concept to get it, but once you've gotten it, you're constantly reviewing it and using it. So it would be spiral in method, but it's not like a course that's like, you know, I'm doing repetition of the material over and over again to reinforce that. Hopefully that made some sense. Okay. Any other questions, be sure to post. Coming up this week, I'm going to shake it up a little bit this week. I'm actually going out to Oklahoma City to Mardell to present our coming line for spring. And Mardell, if you don't know, is it's part owned by the same family that owns Hobby Lobby. And so we are going to be at the Hobby Lobby headquarters. And if it all works out, I'll have my son Nathan with me, and we are going to, I'm just going to do a film on the outside of the Hobby Lobby headquarters, because I know in this audience, there are probably some of you that like Hobby Lobby, and it is massive. It's like a city. It really is. Hobby Lobby's corporate headquarters is just mammoth. And so I'm going to film that and show everybody what the Hobby Lobby headquarters in Oklahoma City looks like from the outside. I probably wouldn't be able to do it from the inside. But so Thursday morning, and I'm not sure about the time. So if you don't see it live, be sure to catch it, because it's an impressive place. First time I saw it, I was just blown away by how big it was. So that we'll be doing on Thursday. On Friday, I am going to present to you. I will give you the sneak peek at what's coming in the spring of 2019 for Master Books curriculum. And I think we have just some phenomenal titles coming. Every year we get better, and I'm excited to present that. So Friday at 11 o'clock, I will let you know what's coming and what to expect. So hopefully you're able to be part of that as well. All right, everybody, thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity to serve your family, and we're excited by the testimonies we're getting. And if there's any questions we can continue to answer, don't be afraid to ask them. And I will also be posting here the author's website, so you can see what her digital course supplement is for your students, and the coupon code as well. So, okay. God bless everybody.